is Swahili for beautiful. Let's journey together here on Zuri TV, hand in hand, arm in arm. Let's navigate today's modern terrain, successfully climb the corporate ladder, raise happy families, build healthy relationships, and positively impact society the godly way. Join me, Ayanda Ali, as we wade through life's everyday challenges and discover God's beauty for ashes. Hello and welcome. You are watching Zuri, and I am watching these gorgeous couples on television. Don't you just love it? Lovebirds, arm in arm, hand in hand, husband and wife. But what happens when it's husband and wife and wife and wife and another one? Polygamy, that's what we're talking about today, and we'll be joined by mom, pastor's wife. She's an author. She's also a finalist for Mrs. South Africa. Pearl Osa is our guest. A little bit later, we'll also catch up with Ayanda Borotho. She's an actress, and interestingly enough, one of the characters she plays is that of a sister wife. So it promises to be an interesting one today. Stay with us. Well, Pearl Osa is one woman who makes me feel so lazy. Okay, count with me the many things that she does. I said she was an author, 2 books. We're on 2 books now. 4 books. 4 books. Mom, 11 kids. Yeah. 11 children. Believe it or not, as gorgeous as she is, her figure is as tight as it is. She's going to give me the secret a little bit later. And then there was the finalist for Mrs. South Africa, a wife to an amazing man of God. You co-pastor the church. You're a recording artist. I know that you also worship. And you're into broadcasting. Okay, where are we now? And the 8th role is... The 8th role is businesswoman. Yes. My goodness, Pearl, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And yes, how many hours a day do you have? The rest of us have 24. How many do you have?
So I've got 24 hours like every one of us does. Probably less because we have to sleep, right?
Yeah,
and we have to eat, right? But if you're indirectly asking how I do it all, I would say it's living my life in a seasonal manner. It's grace. It's understanding that I'm doing what I've been called to do. And if I try to do what you're called to do, I would fail dismally. But walking my lane, it works, right? And when I speak about living seasonally, it's an understanding that you're not going to have summer months all the time. Yeah. It's not going to be spring all the time, you know. And so in those downtimes, what seems to be downtimes are times when I know that my seed is being planted. Yeah. It's hibernation. It'll grow when it's supposed to grow. And being careful not to compare myself with anyone else at that time. So I did the corporate gig, right? And I began to define myself in that corporate, in that corporate light, what I could do in the boardroom and how many hundreds of millions I could manage. And that became, my identity. Was I getting those bonuses? Was I scoring high fives? So you can imagine that when that becomes your world and you suddenly become, for lack of a better term, a housewife, you then begin to think that you're slow, you're behind. Even financially, seasons change at that time because the security of a monthly salary is not coming in. But it was just the understanding that it was a season, that what I was called to do could not be confined to a corporate environment. And my mom always puts it this way. She says, when you want to score a penalty, you never see any soccer player on the field about to score a penalty without running back first to gain momentum. And so I'm careful with my running back times. Yeah. I use them carefully because once I'm going to be shot forward by the hands of the Almighty, understanding I'm an arrow in his hands. And when he says go and he pulls that arrow, are you ready to run? Yeah. So when he pulls, you look like you're flying, but you didn't pull the bow. I didn't do it. Someone else pulled me. And he had me gain momentum in the down times. So when you see me flying, it looks like,
No. Yeah. And not to use as justification. Yes. I'm going to now go into this polygamous relationship because Jacob, I think that's very important. And lastly, I want to find out from you. So you've written a book, Marriage God's Way. Are we saying polygamy is marriage not God's way? What is marriage God's way? What does it look like? And are we limiting other ways and forms of being and saying there is only one way?
A controversial answer to the first question you asked. No, polygamy is not marriage God's way.
Yeah.
As I said, polygamy was something that he took them from and slowly worked out of them. And it does not depict what he wants to show with the institution of marriage. Okay, having said that, then what is marriage God's way? And again, I think my answer is a bit controversial. So I draw this analogy with a corporation. Imagine you're working in a business and we've set out the strategy, we know the vision, and we recruit an individual. We then say, you know what, and this is what God was doing. It is not good for man to be alone. So because he had an assignment and a purpose, in fact, the Bible goes on to say, for this cause. So where there isn't a cause, there's no need for this man to leave his mother, leave his father, and be joined to this wife. Yeah. Ideally speaking. We as human beings have gotten about the business of what cause, what God. I'm here, I'm living my own life. And it confuses me because I'm like, I've never seen a car that I get into the garage, I turn the car on and I say, okay, you're taking me to Willowbrook Estate.
And the car says, wait a minute, like, no. I think not.
No. What purpose, what cause? Yes. That's what we've turned marriage into now. No, it's like, how do you make me feel? Do I love you? Think about all the great marriages in scripture. They did not necessarily start with love. Not all of them. So Adam closes his eyes, he opens his eyes, and a bow has been taken, and voila, and you're going to make it happen. Isaac sitting in his mother's tent. Rebecca is brought. Yeah. But the thing with our God is that he is so gracious that even though marriage is an assignment, it is an institution of these two people who have come together, because it's not good for the one to perform what he's been called to perform alone. Even at that, the remuneration package will blow your mind. So he's called us to work. Marriage is work. It's an assignment. But the remuneration package comes with mind-blowingly awesome, I don't want to use the wrong words on TV, but that kind of stuff that people are busy with. Relations. Knowing of the wife.
Knowing of the wife, yes.
It comes with that because that's how he plays. It comes with children as a continuation of this organization that you formed. It comes with prosperity. It comes with companionship and love. The love will be there because he is love. Our first response is just to say, yes, Lord, how high would you have me jump? And then he's like, watch me bless you. Watch me, just because you surrendered to doing it my way, let me take care of the rest. Yeah.
Okay, now I've really run out of time, but I have to ask you this one in 30 seconds or less. You are a pastor, you mentor young women, etc. If one of your daughters from the church came and said, Mom, I found someone, I love them, and he's in a polygamous relationship, and I want to be the third wife, what would your advice be? Some would say it's better than being cheated on, it's better than hide and seek. What would you counsel her? 30 seconds.
Here's the thing with being a pastor is that you're a consultant.
Yeah.
So nothing you say is necessarily going to be fixed in stone. You need to walk the walk and be an example. I would question her sense of identity, that she thinks she's not enough for God to have created her own, for her to think that you're going to have to share. In the scriptures, and I know it's 30 seconds, but when the Lord looks and says, it's not good for man to be alone, the Bible then tells us he parades options in front of Adam. And whatever Adam called them, then that's what they were. But none was found to be suitable. So he's very deliberate. Marriage is not a buffet, pick and pay, no, I don't want this one. No. He's got the soulmate planned out for the assignment, perfectly tailored. And I would think that not delving in, and I would tell her this, let's pray. Let's ask him, what is your will? And when we get that complete confirmation, this is what he says, then let's go with it. But you're gonna have to face him at the end of the day, so you're gonna have to make the decision.
This is why everybody else didn't make it to the conversation, because it is such a complex discussion. It is so taboo, but it's absolutely necessary because it's happening, right? We can't ignore it. Let's leave it there for the time being. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Paul, thank you so much for your time. Stay with us. When we come back, we chat to Ayanda Borotho. We're now joined by Ayanda Borotho. She is an actress, she's an executive producer and an author. She'll be sharing her life's journey with us. Gama, my namesake. Hello to you. Welcome to Zuri.
Hello, Bizo. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
so
you for having me.
excited that you're here because a little bit earlier on in the show, we were talking about polygamy.
Right.
And I remembered that one of the roles that you've played is that of a sister wife.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Daunting at first.
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of research on it. But I grew into the role. Yeah, it was exciting. It became exciting eventually. There was a lot to learn from it. There was a lot to take away from it. And I think, you know, for me, it also presented me with the opportunity to walk in another woman's shoes that ordinarily I would not have been able to walk in. So MaNgubane Phumelele is a rural woman. She's married into a polygamous family, and that's not who Ayanda is. But what it did is give me an opportunity to live that life, you know, to experience that life. And so I'm grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for what I was able to take out of it.
Yeah. You also shared your views about polygamy quite openly and received a bit of backlash from time to time. Tell me a little bit about A, your views, and B, what people were saying that was not so kind, I suppose, about those views.
So my views were, firstly, clarity, were shared on the basis of a South African show, which I thought was misrepresenting what polygamy is about, right? So they weren't based on my views or my departure point based on the show, because actually what the show tried to do was to position or depict polygamy in a positive light, where the wives were not necessarily bewitching each other, and there was a very strong sisterly bond between them. So when I shared the views on polygamy, it really was on the basis of what I was seeing on television, which I thought was really misrepresenting what polygamy was about. And of course, the backlash came from so-called cultural experts, custodians of so-called custodians of culture, and people who, generally men who thought that I had no right to speak on issues of culture because I was a woman, which is interesting because all these traditions and cultures and laws and policies are made about us, but we're not allowed to partake in them. They don't include us. So the backlash was really on social media, and you know how that can be. However, it wasn't all bad. There were many positives. I think there were more positives than there was the backlash. And of course, a lot of it from women who felt for the first time, in the way that I was explaining how polygamy came about in the Nguni aspect, it really gave them a clearer picture and empowered them to be able to make the right decision for themselves, because they were in relationships where they felt like they couldn't respond because they didn't have enough information.
What sort of discussions should we be having among ourselves as women, and should we be having with our young ones growing up that we're not currently having?
Your question's too deep and it's multifaceted. And I think to delve into it would take days. It requires a workshop. But I think it's important, first of all, that our young girls understand what really women empowerment is about. I'm of the view that, or I disagree with the term women empowerment, because I'm of the view that women don't need to be empowered. Women are born powerful, and they just need to recognize their light, or they need to be given platforms to be able to recognize their light, or they need to be in an environment that is conducive for them to have a voice, right? And so for me, the important conversation with our daughters is that of understanding that when we're born with our own unique codes, right? I call them codes. We're born with our own unique identity. So Ayanda is adorned in rubies and diamonds and pearls and whatever it is, and that's her code, right? But by the time she reaches the age of 7, she's already has put on another coat, a coat that now covers her original coat. Because if you are born into a family, for instance, that is religious, the first coat you're going to wear is one that says, I may not be made in the image of God, because we are taught that God is a male figure, right? So the question then becomes, then what or whose image am I then made in? But what it then does is it creates a psychological narrative that says men are more, or I as a female am less than what men are, because God is male.
I find that so interesting, because I want to find out from you when you started peeling off those layers and when they started leading you to writing your book. Huh?
Yeah.
What is the title?
Unbecoming to become.
Unbecoming to become.
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, and so it's a journey that started with a conversation with God, which is actually the very first page of the book. And the conversation is, and I'll paraphrase it, it's dear God, if it is true that I am made in your image, would it then mean that you manifest as two gods? One is a superior God in men, and secondly, as an inferior God in women. And then that's how the conversation unfolded. And then God told me to go on a journey of self-discovery. And the response was, where you find your answers is where you will find me also, right? And so the book is really based on the premise of perhaps the journey is not about becoming anything, but perhaps the journey is about unbecoming everything that the world has ever taught us that we were, so that we can truly become that which we were created to be. And it's a memoir, but it details different chapters in my life. You won't necessarily find my birth date. It's just different chapters in my life, from when I was dethroned in the home as a girl child. It speaks of my corporate experience as a Black female, and a beautiful Black female at that, because for some reason, when you're a good-looking woman, the stereotype, there are no brains.
Yes.
So all those stereotypes that I had to deal with as a young Black female, and how I actually hated the term affirmative action in BE, because when I got into the corporate space, those were the positions that were open, and it almost felt like I was, and it almost felt like I didn't deserve to be there. I was there because I was Black and I was female
and not on merit.
So it details all of those things. It talks about raising a rebel queen, and how I'm raising my daughter, and some of the challenges I'm having with social media. It goes into GBV. There's a hashtag #MeToo chapter. It's a very, very personal memoir. And I want to say this. I didn't write this book trying to win awards or trying to be intellectual about it. I really wrote this book for somebody like the woman I was playing, Phumelele, right? And that was my dream. My dream has been for this book to reach the ends of the world. And I'm so eternally grateful for how South African women and men have received it, and how well it's done.
I love it. It's about unlearning some of the things that we've picked up along the way.
Right.
I wanna throw a curveball now and ask you, if your daughter were to come to you and say, Mom, I've met someone, I'm head over heels in love, this is my guy, we wanna get married, he is polygamous, and I will then be going into Isthembu. A, what would you say? B, what would your advice be in terms of maybe even contextualizing what is supposed to be in terms of what you understand with Isthembu and how it is today? What would you say?
So I'm a Black mom, and I grew up in Lokshin, and I all star.
Don't be deceived by this contour. Don't be deceived by the makeup.
A Black mom. But with all respect to her, because she is her own person. And like I said, when we started this conversation, is I don't think we can ever make informed decisions when we don't have all the information. And so I think it would be important for me to paint a picture of where Tina as Ngunis Isthembu started for us, and to and I don't want to be or to give the illusion that Isthembu only started then, because we know that Isthembu existed or polygamy existed in biblical times, which was way before the Ngunis existed in the way that they exist now. But what we are told by our elders is that when the warriors had gone to battle, and of course they will always come back and there'd be casualties, and it happened that in this particular instance, the Abathembu women saw how the women who were widowed were suffering because now they had no husbands. And it was the Abathembu women who then proposed to their husbands that, can we take these women and their children in so that they become part of this collective, which is why it is called Isithembu ngoba esabathembu, right? And this is the information that is passed down from our elders. And it's so unfortunate, really, because African history is not well documented. A lot of information gets lost because it's passed down orally a lot of the time. And so the first thing for me that she would need to understand is that polygamy was a concept, or a traditional concept, that was introduced in the family to address a need, not a want. That's the first and most important thing, to understand that it was a tradition that was carried out to address a need within that family or the community. The second thing would be for her to understand that Isithembu, the authority of polygamy and how it is carried out, does not rest with the husband or the man. It rests with the wife.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why we are taught that it would be the first wife who sees a need. Baba, I'm too old, and Baba still wants to grow his isibaya or crawl, wants to have more children, but I'm too old. Oh, Baba, I can't have children, which was actually the concept around the isibaya, a polygamy relationship set up between myself and my sister wife, is that she couldn't have children. And so the second wife came in to bear children for this family. And so it is to understand that that authority and that power must never be taken away from the first wife. It is not polygamy or the right kind of polygamy if that power does not rest with her. Because you see, you cannot unseat or dethrone a woman in her own castle. You can't. She can only dethrone herself. You can't. And so her bringing in another woman must be by virtue of her own power, must be by virtue of her own decision. Then it is true polygamy. And the other very critical thing, I think, for me, for her to answer would be, what impact does it have? And I think that's then the societal question that we should be asking ourselves. What is the impact now? And what is the generational impact? We know, and we have learned from previous relationships or polygamous setups that we've seen, that a lot of them, there are a lot of casualties, a lot of childhood traumas, a lot of brokenness that comes out of that. And so for me, the important thing is then to understand, which also goes back to the core of who we are as Abantu, right? And the core of Isintu, or the core of Ubuntu and humanity, which is to always put others before ourselves, which is why polygamy was never about a need, or was never about a want, but about a need, and a need that must be addressed, which is why she would go and find that wife who would address her need for the family. And then looking into how does this impact all of us moving forward. So for me, I think that's really the broader question we need to be asking ourselves as a society.
So looking at the way polygamy is being practiced today, we've got it all wrong.
I think we've got it all wrong. I think we're feeling a lot more entitled than we should be. We're really practicing it without empathy and compassion for the people that we then involved in all of this. And I think at some point, knowledge no, wisdom needs to override knowledge, because there's a lot of things that we may know, but I think it is in situations like this where we have to apply wisdom, and that's scarce. We have to apply wisdom. So yeah, it would really be about having to apply wisdom and understanding what the consequences of that are. And it's not to say that I'm against it.
Yeah, exactly. You contextualize, and I think context is key. I could listen to you all day. I am fixated on every single word you are saying. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, your journey. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. My goodness. And with that, let's go and pray. Prayer wall. Well, we've come to the end of the show, but not before we jot down a few prayer items for you and I to mull over the course of the week. I don't know about you, but in my conversation with Pearl Osa, what stood out for me was the importance of family as the building blocks of our society. Family is so important. That's where we're supposed to receive love and care and nurture, also discipline and rebuke sometimes, because we will need it from time to time. I also think this is the place where our children should be raised in the way that they should go, so that when they are older, they don't depart from it. So it's important that we pray about family, don't you think? I'm gonna jot that down as the first prayer item for this episode. So we've got here family. And closely linked to family is, of course, the institution of marriage. This is something that is God ordained. We also know that God is one that is responsible for marriages. He likens the relationship that we have with Christ to a marriage, Christ being the bridegroom, us being the bride. So we ought to pray about having happy and healthy and wholesome marriages. So marriage is my second prayer item for today. Marriage. Make sure I get my spelling right there. Okay. And then having spoken to Ayanda Borotho, I just marveled at her growth and how far she's come. It reminded me of what the book of John says, right? That we ought to bear much fruit, showing ourselves to be his disciples. Yeah, personal growth and development. So fruit is the third prayer item for today. Where will we put that? All right, let's put it right here, right? And this can be fruit in every area of our lives. It can be in the workplace. It can be in our relationships. It can be in our physical health and well-being. So we ought to bear fruit. If our family is happy and healthy, our marriages are intact, and we are bearing much fruit in every other part of our lives, then definitely we will be on our way to great success. Let's leave it there, at least for now. We'll do it all over again next week. Until next time, it's goodbye and God bless you.